are creating a piece of toilet paper that could be problematic. That said, if you're in the restroom and suddenly you realize that nobody put the pre-Shabbos prepared uh, tissues or toilet paper there, and you need to use the toilet paper, you are able to do it. It is a leniency out of Kavod Habrius, but at least to minimize the suboptimal use, you shouldn't tear the toilet paper on the perforated part. So again, obviously better to prepare cut toilet paper before Shabbos or boxes of tissues. But in that event that you're stuck, that's what you should do. But that's not what we're going to be touching on today. Today is actually, what if you're stuck in the woods? And the issue with the toilet paper is not the tearing, but it's that anything that you'll use there has not been designated for that use. So we'll touch on it, but thank God it's not as serious of a situation. Okay, so let's take a dive inside. Got quite a bit to cover. Kol Perek Chavav Aleph. Kol Klei Ha'ideg. Start with someone to see who we have here. Kent, Ryan, and John, welcome. Jeff, good to see you. Not sure if that's Rabbi Green or Mr. or Mrs. To Tash, to Martin Greenberg, Leanne, and Harvey Rubin. Good to have all of you with us. Okay. Kol Klei Ha'ideg. All the utensils used for weaving, including the cords and the reeds, may be carried according to the rules governing other utensils that are used for forbidden tasks, which, as we learned yesterday, the object may be carried to perform a forbidden task or because the place in which it is lying is needed. Okay? An exception is made regarding the upper weaver's beam and the lower weaver's beam. They might not be carried because they're usually fixed within the loam. So there's not even a possibility of using it. Similarly, the pillars of the loam may not be removed, lest one fill the earth in the hole in the earth created when they are removed. It is permitted to move the other utensils of the weaver. So essentially, the principle is the same. A utensil which is designated for a prohibited action on Shabbos, but the quality of the utensil is such that you'd be comfortable using it for a permitted activity. Okay, so a hammer which is used to bang nails on Shabbos, like we learned in the previous days, which is used to bang nails on Shabbos. If you want to use it to bang open nuts, you're allowed to. Okay, the idea of opening the nuts is a separate discussion, so it's actually touching on something controversial, but leave that for now. Brooms made of date branches and the like, which are used to sweep the ground, are considered utensils that are used for a permitted purpose, and sweeping is permitted on Shabbos. Bricks that remain after a building was completed are considered utensils that are used for a permitted purpose, for they are fit to recline upon, as is obvious from the fact that they are filled and adjusted for this purpose. Filed and adjusted. Then you file the shape of the bricks to make a chair. If, however, one collects them, it is evident they've been set aside for building, and it is forbidden to carry them. Not because building is prohibited, but because your mind has disconnected from them with the onset of Shabbos, and they therefore will not fall into the category of something that you might have used. A small shard, cheres ketana, may be carried even in the public domain. This thing is granted because it's fit to be used in a courtyard to cover the opening of a small utensil. When the stopper of a barrel has been cut off, both it and its broken pieces are permitted to be carried. If one threw it into a garbage dump before the commencement of the Shabbos, carrying it is forbidden. Okay? When a utensil has been broken but not shattered into pieces, one should not remove a shard from it to use to cover another utensil, or to use as a support. Okay? So what's interesting is that the laws of muktzah are not so much around whether they may bring you to do a transgression on Shabbos. The laws of muktzah, as we learned yesterday and the day before, are an entirely separate area of Shabbos, which is that when you come into the zone of Shabbos, you know in your mind that you are only engaging with that which has been designated for this purpose. So I'm on my Shabbos island. If that item is not on the island with me, it doesn't come into the Shabbos experience. Okay, it is permitted to bring 3 rounded stones into a lavatory to clean oneself. Of what size may they be? A fistful. A clod of earth, by contrast, which is likely to crumble, is forbidden to be taken to clean oneself. Obviously, so this is, as strange as this halacha may seem to us, let's just remember that the production of cheap paper towel or toilet paper is something which we in the Western world of the 20th and 21st century are used to. But hundreds of years ago, it wasn't. It is permitted to take the stones up to the roof so that you can clean oneself with them. When rain descends upon them and they sink in the mud, they may be taken if there is a distinct mark showing their location. In other words, it's the stones that were set aside. When a stone has filth on it, one can be certain that it is used to clean oneself. Therefore, carrying it is permitted even though it is large. Sorry, not a comfortable halacha to be studying. Hey, should a person have a choice? If you have a choice of using a stone or an earthenware shard to clean himself, one should use the stone. In other words, because it's more of a designated utensil. If however the shard comes from the handle of a utensil, one should use the shard because then it's an even more designated utensil. The following rules apply when a person has a choice of using a stone or a grass. If the grass is soft, one should use it. If not, one should use the stone. God save us from ever having to apply these halachot in practical reality. Sorry, there's a comment here. Thank goodness, indeed, Leanne. The remnants of mats that have become tattered are considered utensils that may be used for a permitted purpose, for they are fit to be used to cover filth. In contrast, the remnants of clothes that are less than 3 thumb breadths by 3 thumb breadths and have become tattered may not be carried, for they are not fit, neither for the poor nor for the rich. Okay, so mats, you use the tiny pieces of it, whereas clothing you don't. The broken pieces of an oven are permitted to be carried. They are considered to be like all other utensils that are permitted to be carried. Whenever one leg of a range is split from a place, it may not be carried lest one affix it in its place. So here, in that last line of halacha, we're crossing over from the issues of muktzah, which is the letter of the law that governs the spirit of the law of Shabbos, into the actual law, which is the prohibitions, and therefore it's not so much the issue of muktzah, but that you might come to fix something on Shabbos, which is a separate prohibition. Zayin, sulam shel aliyah, a ladder leading to a loft is forbidden to be carried since it is not considered to be a utensil. Ladder leading, okay, hence moving it at all is forbidden, from which one can derive the following. A ladder leading to a loft is usually left there permanently. Therefore, it has a heavy structure that is not to be considered to be a kli utensil, but rather a permanent part of the building structure. A ladder leading to a dovecote, by contrast, is not considered muktzah and is permitted to be tilted. What shouldn't, however, carry it from one dovecote to another, lest one follow one's ordinary course of conduct and come to snare the doves. Now, where is this halacha very practical for us, the difference between these two ladders? So those of us like me who've been blessed with an abundance of children, which at one point or another, and an abundance of children and a very limited amount of sleeping space, may have had bunk beds in your home. The ladder for a bunk bed, you therefore understand, would be considered like a ladder to a dovecote, not to a loft. And because you're obviously not catching doves on the top bunk of your child's bed, there therefore is no concern in moving it from one to another. The following rule governs the use of a rod that is to harvest olives. When it's categorized as a utensil, it's considered to be a utensil that is used for a forbidden purpose. The following rules govern the use of a reed that is adjusted by a homeowner to open and lock his door. When it's categorized as a utensil, it's considered to be a utensil that is used for a permitted purpose. Okay, many of us have outside the home. We have a landscaper may have put out bricks or stones. Can you use those stones to hold open the door? Okay, you're coming in, you have a few guests coming in behind you, you want to just put a brick there. It depends. If it's a stone that you've used before to hold open the brick, then you're allowed to. Are you allowed to just go and pick up a stone, though, from the ground? No. Why? Not because of any prohibition surrounding it, but because it's muktzah. It is disconnected from you in terms of Shabbos usage. Dalas shahayilatzir. The following rules apply to a door that once had a hinge, though at present it doesn't have a hinge, which is prepared to close a yard, but which drags on the door when it's opened and closed. If the door is attached to and hanging on the wall, it may be used to close the space and may be locked. If not, it may not be used to close the space. So a disconnected door should not be used. If it's suspended above the ground, it may be used to close the space. Same rules apply to a partition made from brambles or a mat that drags on the floor, that it needs to be clearly having some sign of designation to be used on Shabbos. Test the following rules. Door that is made from a single piece of wood which is placed in the doorway to close it and removed to open it. If the doorway doesn't have a base at the bottom that resembles a doorstep, that would indicate the door is the utensil that is used for opening and closing the door, may not be used to close the doorway. If it does have a doorstep, one may use the door. Okay? So the note there points out the difference, the machlekes, about whether or not the Shulchan Aruch follows this, but the consensus is that you can use a door that you actually pick up and put back and forth. Similarly, a bolt that has a bulb at its end that indicates that it is a utensil used to bolt a door and is not merely an ordinary beam, may be used to bolt a door on the Shabbos. Yud. Neger she'ein bereisha kluster, a bolt that does not have a bulb at its end. It is tied to the door and suspended from it. We may use it to bolt the door on the Shabbos. This ruling applies when it is carried together with a rope attaching to its door. Okay, so this is again relevant. If the bolt of your door was lost and you're just using a piece of metal, it has to be clearly designated for Shabbos. If it, by contrast, the rope attaching it is fixed permanently to the door and the bolt is moved like a beam placed in a corner and then reattached when one desires, its use as a bolt is forbidden on the Shabbos. So then, if it's not clearly, why? Because it was not a common form of use. This is forbidden because the bolt is not considered to be a utensil, nor is there any indication that it's being used as a utensil, for it is not attached to the door, nor it is connected by a rope. Yudalef, menorah shel chulyes, a candelabrum that is made of several separate parts, may not be moved on Shabbos. This restriction applies regardless of whether it is large or small. Why was this prohibition instituted? As a safeguard lest it fall apart and one reconstruct it on the Shabbos. The following rules apply when a candelabrum has grooves and thus appears to resemble one that is made from several parts. If, however, it is large and can be carried only with two hands, then carrying it is forbidden because of its weight. If it is smaller than that, however, carrying it is permitted. So, yeah, the normal common menorah today would fall into that category, which is permitted. We may remove a shoe from a shoemaker's block on the Shabbos. We may release a clothes press belonging to an ordinary person on the Shabbos. By the way, just to point out, in terms of the menorah, this would not apply to any candlestick or a menorah that's been used on Shabbos or Yom Tov. Why? Because when Shabbos or Yom Tov came in, it was being used. It had a flame on it, which obviously would have made touching it in any way prohibited. And something which is prohibited to touch when Shabbos comes in, the absence of the cause of the prohibition later on during Shabbos does not now open up a gate of a reason to permit it. A press belonging to a launderer should not be touched at all. It is set aside not to be used because of the financial loss that might be incurred through its improper use. Similarly, unprocessed rolls of wool may not be carried because their owner objects to the use for purpose other than spinning fabric. Therefore, if they have been set aside for a particular purpose, it is permitted to use them. Unprocessed hides, regardless of whether they belong to a private person or another craftsman, may be carried because, again, so it's things which have casual use on Shabbos, and people are not bothered by that. All filth, examples given, feces, vomit, excrement, and the like that is located in a courtyard of people are dwelling, may be removed to a dung heap or a latrine. So we're actually going with something of a leniency there, because of the kavod habrius, the honor of the living. Such entities are referred to as a chamber pot. If it is located in another courtyard, meaning if it's not in your face, it should be covered by a utensil so that a child will not become soiled by it, but it shouldn't be moved. One may not step on spittle that is lying on the ground without taking any notice of it. May step without taking notice of it. One may carry a warming pan because of its ash. This leniency is granted despite the fact that it contains a bit of wood because it is equivalent to a chamber pot, like we said earlier. At the outset, we may not bring about the creation of a repulsive entity on the Shabbos. So if ever such an entity comes about as a natural process, or one transgresses and creates it, it may be removed. So this grav shel re'i, this repulsive entity, is something we should try to avoid from creating on Shabbos. If it happens, we deal with it. Shemen sheyotzi yedalef, permitted to take oil that flows from beneath the beam of an oil press on Shabbos, and from dates and almonds that are prepared to be sold. You can partake of the oil. One may even begin to take grain from a storehouse, from a grain pile on the Shabbos, for food never becomes muktzah on the Shabbos at all. On the contrary, all types of food are always prepared for use. There is, however, one exception: figs and raisins that have been set aside to dry. Why? Since they pass through an intermediate stage where they become repulsive and are unfit to eat, they are considered muktzah and are forbidden to be carried on Shabbos, unlike all the other foods, which at the various stages of their processing are still fit to eat. A barrel of wine or a watermelon that was opened, in other words, you're now accessing the liquid inside, may be carried and stored away even though it is no longer fit to eat. Similarly, an amulet that has not proven its efficacy may be moved, although it's forbidden to go out into the public domain wearing it. The oil, however, that remains in a lamp or in a bowl that was killed on a particular Shabbos may not be used on that Shabbos. This is touching on what I said earlier. If when Shabbos came in, this food, this oil, was in a state that it was untouchable, it is muktzah because of the forbidden labor with which it was associated bein hashmashot. Meaning, because it was being used to kindle a fire when Shabbos came in, it is forbidden now as well. Just to touch on that concept, what does bein hashmashot shab mean? There is a principle that if something is out of mind for the moment, the second that Shabbos comes in, the Knisat HaShabbat, then it's forbidden for all of Shabbos. Now, when is the exact moment that Shabbos comes in? Anybody want to suggest an answer? What time does Shabbos begin?
Well, Rabbi, when the first 3 stars come out?
So Shabbos begins, you might say, by Tseis HaKechavim. But when do we actually light Shabbat candles?
18 minutes before tonight.
Before sunset.
7 tonight,
okay.
Before sunset, yeah.
So now you mentioned 2 different times in reference to the lighting of the candles. 18 minutes before and sunset. The 18 minutes that we add on are firstly to add an extra few minutes of Shabbos. and because because we don't want it to be on the button. But essentially, sunset. Okay, true, 18 minutes before sunset, but essentially it's sunset. So now here's the question: does Shabbos start at sunset? Meaning, obviously, we accept Shabbos earlier, 18 minutes earlier, or in the summer, perhaps much, much earlier. So when does the Shabbos start? At sunset or at the at the stars coming out, at nightfall? And that is considered the classical period of doubt, which is referred to as Bein Hashmashot, between sunset and nightfall. So when do we actually start Shabbos? At sunset, meaning 18 minutes before, but whatever. Sunset. When do we end Shabbos? At the end of nightfall. That period, let's put it at approximately 45 minutes, is called Bein Hashmashot, between the sunsets. Okay? So anything, that whole period is, we swing both ways on it in terms of keeping it Shabbos. So why is Shabbos always 25 hours if it's one day, 24? Because it's that hour which we don't know where to put it in. So on both ends of Shabbos, we include it as part of Shabbos. And so we observe Shabbos fully in that period. So something which was prohibited during that period, the onset of Shabbos, which we take that second of the beginning of Shabbos and we stretch it out for 45 minutes, if it's prohibited, if it's out of use for Bein Hashmashos, we follow that for the entire time. Tezvav. Produce from a storehouse. Although taking the produce from a storehouse of grain or barrels of wine is permitted, it is forbidden to begin to empty the storehouse unless it's being done for the purpose of a mitzvah. In other words, emptying it to host guests or to establish a hall of study. How should the storehouse be emptied? Every person should take out 4 or 5 containers until they've been completely cleared. We may not, however, sleep before a storehouse, has been explained earlier. Even when one is forbidden to empty it, one may enter and leave to create a path with one's feet by entering and leaving. Tazayin. What about animal food? Any substance that is fit to be used as food for an animal, beast, or fowl that is commonly found may be carried on the Shabbos. What do we mean? One may carry the dry turmus beans, even though it's not commonly eaten by people, because they are food for goats. Fresh beans may not be carried because even goats we don't give them. One may carry chatzah because it's food for deer, mustard seed because it is food for doves, and bones because they are food for dogs. In other words, animal food or potential animal food can be carried. Similarly, we may carry all the shells and seeds of produce that are fit to serve as animal fodder. Considering those that are not fit to be eaten, one should eat the food and throw the shells or seeds behind one's back. Carrying them is forbidden. But as I pointed out, Shulchan Aruch Harav in the Siddur says that therefore one should not eat nuts that have seeds. So that's why, according to some, myself, for example, I won't eat pistachios on Shabbos because of the problem of the seeds, of the shells. One may carry meat that has spoiled for it's fit to be eaten by beasts. One may carry raw meat whether salted or unsalted because it's fit to be of humans. This ruling applies to raw fish that has been salted. By contrast, carrying unsalted raw fish is forbidden. Now, for the explains here, for it is unfit for both human and animal consumption. How that the implications of that in terms of enjoying your sashimi or nigiri sushi is for a discussion between you and your local Orthodox rabbi. But I would say that in today's world where eating plain raw fish has become commonplace, it would be permitted. We may not carry broken pieces of glass even though they're edible by ostriches, the namiot, which are sometimes even called the basayin. They eat pieces of glass. You don't do it because it's not common. Whether the Jewish community of Oatshorn would be permitted to get a special permission for that we'll leave for them. Nor bundles of twig from a vine, even though they're edible by elephants, nor luf, even though it's edible by ravens. These restrictions were instituted because these and similar species are not commonly found among most people. The following rules apply to bundles of straw, bundles of wood, bundles of twigs. If they were to appear to be used for animal fodder, one may carry them. If not, may not carry them. If one brought in bundles of wild hyssop, matter, hyssop, or thyme to be used as kindling wood, one may not use them on Shabbos, but if you brought them in for the use as animal fodder, or obviously for food, one may use them, and similar rules apply to mint, rue, and other herbs. Okay. Yutes, ein gerfin, meichel mipnei hapitam. We may not rake food that was placed before an ox that is being fattened for slaughter. This applies regardless of whether the food has been placed in a feeding trough that is a separate utensil or an earthen feeding trough. Similarly, one must shift the food to the side so it doesn't become mixed with feces. These restrictions, decrees, are instituted lest one level grooves in the floor. So again, it's an element of muktzah because it might lead to a prohibited act. One may take food that is placed before a donkey and placed before an ox, because one may not, by contrast, for an ox will not hesitate to eat it from before a donkey, so it's okay. One may not, by contrast, take food that is placed before an ox and place it before a donkey, because the donkey will be afraid to take it. This restriction is insisted because the food that is before an ox becomes soiled by its spittle and is not fit to be eaten by another animal. So therefore, you cannot take food which is in a movable state and put it into what will soon become an unmovable state. Leaves that produce a foul and repulsive odor are not eaten by animals, may not be carried. For some of the reasons, carrying the hook on which fish are hung is forbidden. By contrast, the hook on which meat is hung is permitted to be carried because the stench is not as bad. The same applies in all similar situations. Chaf. Even though it's prohibited to carry a corpse in Shabbos, one may anoint it and wash it, provided one does not move any of its limbs. So you would be allowed to do it. Why? Again, because of kavod hameis. All the leniencies mentioned in this halach are intended to inhibit the process of the corpse's discomposition. When we may slip at a pillar from under it so that it will be lying on the ground to enable it to remain without decomposing. We may bring a utensil that will cool a corpse, or a metal utensil and place it on the belly of the corpse so the corpse will not swell. And we may stop up the corpse's orifices so that air will not enter them. We may tie its jaw, not so that it will close, but so that it will not open further. We may not close a corpse's eyes on the Shabbos. Aleph, when a corpse is lying in the sun, we place a loaf of bread or a baby on it and carry it into the shade. Why? Obviously, it's a much greater level of leniency, but if it's lying in the sun, then the decomposition and disgrace of the body would be far worse. Similarly, if a fire breaks out in a court where a corpse is lying, we may place a loaf of bread or a baby on it and carry it out from the fire. Just to be clear, obviously, the loaf of bread or baby are items that we're carrying, are permitted to be carried, and therefore allowing for the body to be carried as well. Indeed, even if a loaf of bread or baby are not available when we save a corpse from a fire, this leniency is granted lest when extinguish the fire out of apprehension, the corpse not be consumed by the flames. The leniency of carrying an entity with a loaf of bread or a baby upon it is granted only in the case of a corpse. Why? Because a person is distraught over the corpse of his loved ones. Sorry that we're ending on this not so exciting note. Chavbei, the following procedure should be adhered to when a corpse is lying in the sun, as there's no place to carry it or the people do not desire to move from its place. 2 people should come and sit, one on each side of the corpse. If it is too warm for them to sit on the ground, they may both bring couches and sit on them. If it's too warm for them to sit in the sun, they may bring mats and spread them over the couches as a way of showing honor. And by doing this, they're able to give some sort of honor by being there. Afterwards, they may both depart, overturn the couches, and remove them, leaving the mats suspended over the corpse. In this manner, the covering is created on its own accord, as it were, for the 2 mats are next to each other, and 2 ends are located on the ground on either side of the corpse. So the Rambam is basically giving us a permitted manner in which we create some sort of a covering for this body. When a corpse has decomposed in a house to the extent that it produces a foul odor and thus is being disgraced in the eyes of the living, the honor is being comprised because of it. Carrying it into a carmelis is permitted. What's interesting is that the Rambam would not consider our public domain necessarily a carmelis because he does not have the qualification of it needing to have 600,000 people. But the Shulchan Aruch and the Rambam, meaning both Sephardi and Ashkenazi halacha, follow the opinion that it would not be a problem to carry it then into a public domain. into the semi-public domain, which is our Carmelists. This leniency was granted because the honor of the creatures covered abrius is doicha, supersedes the observance of the negative commandment of the Torah, which is do not swerve right or left from the words they will tell you. If the people in the home have an alternative place to go, they may not remove the corpse. Instead, the corpse should be left in this place and they should depart. So if they're in the home and they have absolutely nowhere to go, then it can be brought into the public domain. What's interesting here on this last halacha, I just want to point out an interesting idea, is when the Rambam says, why do we permit them carrying it into the public domain? He says, because a leniency was granted to supersede the negative commandment of the Torah, which is the commandment to observe the rabbinic commandments. In other words, every rabbinic mitzvah is a biblical mitzvah. Which biblical mitzvah is it? Which means that in a certain sense, for example, if I don't make a bracha on my food, it's in a way more serious than not saying the morning Shema. Why? Because the morning Shema is a biblical obligation. Making the bracha on my food is a biblical prohibition. What I mean, it's a biblical prohibition that by transgressing it, I'm ignoring the teachings of our sages. In other words, the mitzvahs that Rabbana, those mitzvahs that have that unique quality are in that category of do not swerve from the teachings of our sages. Any questions?
Rabbi, a quick question, please. You used the expression touching an object which is muksa. I'd always understood it to be moving an object.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That would be a more accurate translation.
Thank you.
Indeed. Any other questions, thoughts, comments, concerns? All right. Well, have a beautiful Shabbos, Kent. And John, good Shabbos. Dennis, David, good Shabbos. Ryan, have a beautiful Shabbos. Leanne.
You too, Rabbi. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Rambam. See you later.